I listened to this Sopranos-based podcast called No Fucking Ziti. It's hosted by like two dudes around my age, and the episode they did, they covered last week was of the Blue Comet. Now, I've never met these guys. I'm just a fan of theirs.
Right.
But I knew I was interviewing you when I listened to this episode, and one of the questions that got sent to them was, what is a Sopranos-based spinoff that you'd like to see? And one of the hosts answered, a buddy comedy starring Little Carmine and AJ going through the porn business.
That's pretty damn good.
With that information fresh in your mind, do you have any storylines in mind?
Oh boy, with that information, you mean just to come up with the storylines right now? Wow, that's a tough one. Well, I think he wanted to try to move out of the porn business. He wanted to try to go legit, but really, because the important thing was to do quality, good movies, like Cleaver. Just high end, high brow.
With the third most popular Baldwin.
that whole thing. Did you ever watch the making of Cleaver?
I did.
That's, to me, that was one of the most fun things we ever did. Of course, I just blew off your question about storylines for AJ. And
it all happened. It happens.
It happened.
Speaking of, so I know behind the scenes, like Alec Baldwin was trying for a very long time to get on the show. And David Chase was famously telling him, no, you're too famous. It would be like distracting to the audience. And then he goes and hires his brother. Do you know for a fact if that was deliberate? Was that a deliberate troll move on David Chase's part?
Wow, I really couldn't answer that question, but I just always thought it was interesting because not only did we have, the lesser Baldwin, is that what you called him? Then we also
third most famous Baldwin.
Yeah, then we also had the second most famous LaPaglia. Right? Anthony LaPaglia, the brother, played.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Anthony LaPaglia, who's a pretty famous actor, it was his younger brother who played the Christopher part in Cleaver. So I think he made the choice to go with the lesser brothers, so to speak. Not that that's true, but as perceived by the audience, the lesser of the brothers.
What is because you're in the series finale, which is still to this day one of the most heavily debated series finales on TV. What is your take on that final scene?
I do have it. Interestingly enough, I've given it some thought. Well, from a cinematic point of view, as I see it, which is absolutely, by the way, you'll find the right answer. Everybody always goes to the line that he told Bobby early, you don't see it coming.
Right.
When it happens, everything just goes black. The screen does go black, but not for Tony. My idea is if we were looking at the door, which was Tony's point of view, if we were looking at the door where Meadow was coming in when it went black, then we could absolutely assume and be sure that it was Tony that got whacked because it's his point of view. But it wasn't. It went black when we were looking at Tony. Now, had he been killed, we would have seen it when it went black. The idea, as I see it, which, by the way, I already prefaced by saying is 100% right, is that it was the audience that got whacked.
Right.
It's over for us. Because, that episode, Life Goes On, if you look at it, the interesting thing about that scene is it's basically the happiest they ever were.
Right.
As a family. They were all together. And the episode is called Made in America.
Right.
And if you look at the crowd in that diner, we had never seen that diner before, that restaurant. It was such a mix of Americana. You had like this trucker that could look like he could be from the South. You had the Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts.
Right.
You had a young couple. You had the urban guys come in. You had
the members only jacket.
The members only jacket. But so basically, the way I saw it, that scene was America in total. And what he was trying to say is that the what you saw in this series is not just restricted to the world of the Sopranos and New York, New Jersey crime families, but it's America in general. How's that?
Now, the most classic television show on television in history aside, what are you working on now?
Well, interestingly, nobody's working on anything now.
Well, I mean, what can we expect in the near future?
But in general, usually actors hate that question. But now I can honestly say, nobody's working, because if we're not,
that's a pretty great response. You should
usually get say, I'm not working. Ray Liotta's working. Ray Romano's working. All the Rays are working. I'm not working. I could normally say that, but in this particular case, nobody's working. But there's a new movie on HBO right now. I don't know if you've seen it. They're promoting the hell out of it, called Bad Education.
With Catherine Narducci.
Catherine Narducci's in it, but it stars Alex. And Narducci and I also played husband and wife on an episode. In an
episode of SVU, I remember that.
Is it SVU or the SUV? Law and Order, as Christopher called it, Law and Order, the SUV.
I really like how Michael Imperioli had a recurring role on Law and Order during the time that scene was shot.
He did, didn't he? That's right. That's funny. I never even realized that. But Narducci and I played husband and wife in an episode. But what were we just talking about? You were just asking me a question before I went off on the SUV. What was the point?
Fuck. What was it?
It was
I asked you what you were working on now, and then you were talking about how actors hate that question. So I will definitely take notes about that, because I'm still fairly new to this.
Yes, Bad Education. It just came out on Saturday night, starring Hugh Jackman, Allison Janney, Ray Romano, that other Ray who's always working, and Narducci's in it, and I'm in it, and I play Allison Janney's husband.
Awesome.
And it's a really terrific film. It's based on a true story that happened on Long Island and the school districts in Long Island. Hugh Jackman's amazing, and Allison Janney is always amazing, and she was so great to work with. I don't have a huge part, but as I said, I got to play an Academy Award winner's husband.
That's pretty sweet. That's good for anyone's resume.
And it's worth. I've gotten to work with some great people. Think about it. Even Lauren Bacall and Ben Kingsley in one scene.
Oh yeah. You watched Lauren Bacall get punched in the face. What other people can say that?
Well, I actually didn't. I wasn't involved in that, thank God.
Okay.
Right, that was Murmur and Christopher. I wouldn't have had any part. That's a perfect example of something little Carmine would not have done.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So the last time we spoke, you told me.
I'm drinking an Arnold Palmer, by the way. Go ahead.
Very nice. I always enjoy them when I have them, but I never think to order one.
See, I'm going to give you an example of great writing. That line there shows the depth of the writing of Terry Winter and the other writers on The Sopranos. Because in that scene, Tony and I, as soon as I come up, I said, I would have asked you to play, but we already had our foursome. So already, and he's like, yeah, sure. Okay. But I wouldn't have asked him to play, but that's the excuse I'm giving.
Sure.
Then we sit down and order, and I ordered a sear ahi, mixed greens, and an iced tea. And he says, Philly cheesesteak with a little edge on it, I'm not.
Oh, you're eating healthy? Fuck you.
Fuck you, right. But then little Carmine is astute enough through the writing of Terry Winter to try to mimic and have some commonality with Tony by the whole Arnold Palmer thing, to just kind of give them the same level. It's like, people mirror each other's gestures to try to pull somebody in. I thought that was just subtle, but I thought that was brilliant writing right there. What
is your favorite show helmed after The Sopranos, show ran by one of the writers? So Mad Men, Boardwalk Empire, Vinyl. Which is your favorite out of all of those?
That's a tough list. I didn't watch much of Mad Men, even though I was on it. Did you know that?
I got halfway into season 2, and then just life happened, and it was one of those things. But yeah. I will pick back up. I was there far enough to see Father and Tintola.
Well, I didn't watch it. Oh, right, he's in it too. I didn't watch it either again until I was on it, and then I watched it. They called me in to play a doorman, which is an interesting story, because apparently the character was a true story that Terry Winter had told Matt Weiner about years earlier, about a doorman that just always talked too much or was a little too affable. So then Matt Weiner used that character and then used me to play it. So
that's amazing.
And it was also directed by, oh my God. Oh, I'm so embarrassed, because he was also a producer on The Sopranos, and he directed one of the episodes of Mad Men. Oh, this is terrible, because he also produced a play I just did recently.
Alan Taylor?
Oh God, Alan Taylor's genius. He's He's the real deal. Oh, Alan Taylor directed that episode you were just talking about at the golf course.
Okay, awesome. And he's directing The Many Saints of Newark.
He directed that. He directed a bunch of Game of Thrones, and he's a big deal. He's a real deal. Yeah.
So the last time we spoke, you told me a story that it's a scene, I believe, in The Second Coming where you're at Phil's door, and behind the scenes, James Gandolfini, who famously played Tony Soprano, is cupping your ass the entire time.
Yes, for my close-up.
Would you say that was the essence of working with Jim?
Well, he would do that kind of thing when appropriate, when he knew that an actor's not going to blow a take doing it. It just kind of added a little edge to it. What I'd say the essence of working with Jim was you were so connected when you were talking to him. We were both trained the same way in New York, the same method of acting, the Meisner method, which is, and I didn't know that till after he passed away. But when I went back and looked and thought of our work together, I realized that, yeah, he did work that way. It's just, he just pulled you in. And I've said this before, if you have a favorite character on your show, a secondary character on the show, and you think about their best scene, I would bet their scene is with Jimmy, because he just made you a little better. You know, it's acting is very much like tennis. You know, if you hit the ball to somebody and they give it back to you with something else, and you have to it just adds a texture and a levels to the scenes that might not be on the page. And if you watch that scene that we're talking about, you could go back and analyze that lunch scene with him. You could see there's a lot of stuff in between the lines that go on between Jimmy and I. Me reacting to him reacting to me, and it's because of who he was and his dedication to his work and his craft that I was better in that scene than I might have been with somebody else.
Absolutely. Like the way he could act with his eyes, I've never seen in anybody else. Like the prime example I always give people when I'm trying to like pitch the show to somebody is, I believe it's in that same episode where Tony walks into the kitchen, Meadow says, "Do you know anybody named Coco?" And before he even responds, just that look in his eyes, it was like, why? Yeah. Boy,
that is that episode. That's
that same episode.
That's an amazing episode, because then that's also the scene where then he goes to see Coco, and then, right? And
yeah.
And then they have the group meeting with Melfi, with his what? Don't they? And he has
they do the group session with AJ's therapist.
Yes, and he's got and he looks down in his cuff. I don't want
the tooth is in his cuff.
That's a lot going on in that episode. Wow. That's
most definitely. One thing I really appreciated about your character was, like, after AJ attempted suicide, he was kind of the only one who really, like, halfway knew how to respond to it. Like, he begins that conversation with, like, look, if there's anything I can do for AJ, like, I was like, see, that's the kind of person he is.
He is, yes, he is. And the other guys would do that too. Like, you might have, little Paulie might say something like that, but you knew it was for an ulterior motive.
Sure.
Right? Or, but I think little Carmine basically was a family man in the real sense of family man, not in the mafia sense of family man. So I think he totally, because there were several times that he talked about his past and his personal life and how you're right.
Most definitely. Well, Ray, I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I want to thank you so much.
Because you know that the time is less than limited.
This is true. You know what? I will ask you one more question, actually. Okay. So I was kind of scrolling over your Instagram. It is very, very politically charged.
Yeah.
What is your take? How do you think this next election is going to play out?
Boy, I could only hope.
What are you hoping for, and what do you think will happen?
Well, what I'm hoping for is that we end up with a new administration. I think that, here's what I always say. When I hear some of these rambling answers that he gives to these things, he makes little Carmine sound like, William F. Buckley.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So if somebody actually just took a transcript of his words and read them out loud, you'd realize that there's not a lot of depth going on there. So that's besides
Makes
the point.
that line about being an effective leader sound like Shakespeare.
That's right. And historically speaking, historical changes have come out of war, which is an interesting thing because, that was a takeoff on George W. Bush. That line was a direct quote from George W. Bush that Little Carmine says.
Oh, wow.
Here's another insight. That's why I wore cowboy boots in every scene.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's never referred to. They make no reference to it. You barely see the cowboy boots, but I wear cowboy suit boots and a cowboy belt in every scene for that reason.
That show just in general is one of the greatest time capsules of just like post 9/11 Bush administration, people thinking that it's not going to get more ridiculous. God, were we wrong?
Yeah, there is that. But I do want to say I have another Instagram page, which I think people should go to, which is Real Ray Abruzzo, which is just photos and clips and showbizy stuff. And so Real Ray Abruzzo Instagram.
Awesome.